Hey everyone, this is a conversation with Igor Jerman, a Slovenian researcher and professor in the field of biomagnetic fields. Now, why should you listen to this? Well, I actually found him out of interest for certain tech. Tech like this right here, that's designed to influence the brain on some sort of level that I find to be quite fascinating. Now, the exact mechanism inside the device is something that we get into in this conversation, but the short form, or I guess the preface, so that you can understand the conversation a little bit better, is that he is not only a researcher in the field, but he is working for a company called PEMF, who is making this device using pulsed electromagnetic frequencies to influence the brain. Now, I was quite fascinated by this kind of technology, first hearing about it through transcranial magnetic stimulation, which uses big coils to just send a lot of magnetic power into the brain. And quite honestly, due to the level of power that it has a pretty significant impact in the brain, but can also lead to side effects if in the hands of an average consumer, someone who's untrained. And so I guess a big motivation for this company was how can we use relatively similar technology at a lower power to influence the human brain, the oscillations of brainwaves inside of us, in order to change our mental state, but do so in a lot more safe way, and in a way that we can actually not only afford but put into hardware that isn't giant, because TMS requires expensive hardware, and it's usually not something you could just take in a device like this and throw on your head. So I really wanted to sit down with Igor, ask him a ton of questions about the technology, about why they made the device the way they did, and about the future of this technology. So in this conversation, we cover a lot of those questions. I apologize if I didn't dig deep enough into some of the terminology throughout it, or if sometimes I didn't ask questions that you might have wanted to ask him. I had originally recorded this thinking that I would only cut out small clips that I would later put into the eAthlete Labs video, but I decided that since I have the conversation on my hard drive, both of our video recorded, why not just throw it up on YouTube somewhere so that some people can check it out if they want to. Nonetheless, I hope you guys really enjoy the conversation. If at any point throughout the video you want to check out the Neorhythm itself, you can check it out by just Googling Neorhythm. Or if you want to support the channel, they have set up an affiliated link. So if you use that link and you end up making a purchase of the device because you want to try it out, then it would actually end up supporting this channel and the main channel as well. So feel free to check that out. Otherwise, just enjoy the conversation. And to kind of just dive into things, I think I'd be curious to, for both my own sake and for the sake of anyone who sees clips from this interview, just telling us a bit about your career and how it has kind of come up, what inspired you, what interested you, and how it led you to where you are today.
Okay, so my name is Igor Jerman. I'm a professor of theoretical biology and of evolution too. But I devoted my research life mostly to bioelectromagnetics and to related problems. Since 1990, this institute where I worked even today has been founded, and the name of this institute is the Institute BION, the Institute for Bioelectromagnetics and New Biology. So even from the name, it is clear that the institute was founded to do a research or more profound research in bioelectromagnetics, which is actually the field that also Neorhythm is working on, application of this, let's say. Now, so I made a university career, and I'm still in this university waters. I had many students, many graduated with me or made their doctorates or master theses, and many of them also in bioelectromagnetics. Bioelectromagnetics can be introduced as a science that works with electromagnetic fields in relation to organisms. And we understand this as the study of effects of different electromagnetic fields, mostly magnetic fields actually, on organisms or vice versa. So, what are the endogenous electromagnetic fields in organisms, and what does they mean? And because it is very interesting and also important for these topics that organisms themselves have their own electromagnetic fields uh, in the cells, that are partially coherent. This means that they are like laser waves, so that all their crests are at the same time, and although they're down, points, and this means that it seems that life is at least partially organized also on the basis of electromagnetic field, therefore not only on the basis of biochemistry and macromolecules, as it is mostly concerned and estimated today in contemporary science. Yeah. So actually, we researched this for 30 years. This interaction between organisms and magnetic fields, and not only we did not only the research concerning humans and electromagnetic fields, but also plants and electromagnetic fields. Actually, perhaps my most read articles, scientific articles, are just in this field of the influence of magnetic fields on, let's say, spruce seeds and how they are germinating.
Oh, interesting. And in I guess in human or other animal application, what do you think the implication of your research can help with? Do you think it would ultimately help with things like medical devices or treating certain illnesses, or is it mostly just trying to understand the fundamentals before we worry about the implications of it?
Well, one thing is, of course, we at the Institute are interested in fundamental science, okay, but we also see many, many possibilities of application
Hmm.
of this bioelectromagnetic research. Just for the reasons you mentioned, this is, for instance, the influence on health um, or on well being, and we have the vision that by much more developed bioelectromagnetics as it is today, we can devise or engineer certain devices and fields that can really help very much in combating illnesses that are today seen as uncurable. Yeah?
Mm.
So this is a possibility, either via combination with medicines or just independently of them.
Mm.
And yes, we see also other possible applications in agriculture, for instance, in biotechnology, and so on. And I must mention that we can have also different grades of bioelectromagnetics. We can have, for instance, something like a basic bioelectromagnetics, where we work with normal magnetic fields,
Mhm.
And then we can have more refined bioelectromagnetics where we can work via, for instance, water that was irradiated by certain electromagnetic fields, and any human can then drink this water, and it can also bring differences in his or her body, and so on. So we see many possibilities. We also know, for instance, a very interesting research, is so-called resonant recognition model, where there is an intersection between bioelectromagnetics and biochemistry, where through certain mathematical computation you can, for instance, compute the essential frequency of certain chemical reaction, and then you can irradiate a human being or whichever organism by this specific frequency, and it can enhance this or that molecular interaction. So you can actually influence biochemistry via specially designed and, of course, known bioelectromagnetics modes.
Interesting. And would that come in the form of using a device, I guess, on a different, maybe like a medical grade, but similar to a neorhythm where you have a device affecting the bioelectromagnetics while there's something like a drug interaction in the body? Is that where that would come into play?
Well, yes, these fields, like with Neorhythm, yeah, these are magnetic pulsed fields. This means that a magnetic field raises very steep, this curve of raising of the magnitude of the magnetic field,
Yeah.
and then it rests for some time and drops down. So this is what is meant by pulsed, and it works very efficiently. I mean, on organism efficiently in the sense that the energies of these fields are normally very low, so that such influence as used with Neorhythm is actually non-invasive. This means that you um, uh, influence the physiology of the brain, for instance, in a non-invasive way, subtly, so that the organism uh, can have certain shield also, if it is better for the organism, against such radiation. It is not forced.
Right.
This is important. This is a difference. For instance, there is a difference, important difference between this repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation,
Yeah.
RTMS, and pulsed electromagnetic stimulation or fields,
Mhm.
PEMF, um, in the sense that with TMS, normally the fields would be very high. I mean, these magnetic fields are of so high intensity, approaching, for instance, 1 Tesla, that it really it can not only influence, but it can provoke the firing of our neurons,
Yeah.
like any other stimulus from the external world. And this is an invasive method. While with PEMF used in Neorhythm, for instance, it is non-invasive. So nothing is really forced. So the organism can adapt to it, and also um, it can refuse such influence if it is better for it.
Ah, okay. In that sense, would you say that something like TMS might cause potential problems, side effects, issues where PEMF is a lot safer for not causing side effects like that?
Yes, from what I know, I would say yes. I mean, even RTMS of course, they use mostly 1 hertz, for instance, and certain spots on the school for stimulation.
Hmm.
And this also went through their own tests. So many tests were performed. And in this sense, I would say that, like with drugs,
Hmm.
uh, under certain conditions and under certain limitation, it should be safe,
Yeah.
also RTMS. But
Right.
with PMF, I would say that this is much safer or absolutely safe even without such restrictions,
Yeah.
Um, and this, of course, should also be tested. But I went through really many, many scientific articles because not long ago, I did such a very, let's say, uh, integrative research in using of different PMF stimulation regimes for different symptoms, how to ameliorate them. And uh, the outcome of this was that no scientific author of this research um, found any harmful side effect of magnetic stimulation if it is of low level,
Okay. And
sufficiently low level. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, in the Neorhythm device, like you mentioned, it's around like I think you said like 2 to 3 millitesla, correct?
Well, it is yes, 2.5. Yeah.
And
Tesla. Yeah.
if you were to say like TMS is magnitudes higher than that, but if you were to say have like it's like 25 millitesla or like 100 millitesla, do you think that at that point there is a certain level of danger there that you're starting to push into dangerous territory, or are there certain regulations by certain medical companies that's saying if it's a consumer device, it has to be at a certain level? I'm curious why you settled on that number specifically.
Yes. Well, everything that is used in Neorhythm was based on the previous study, a very profound um, study of scientific literature,
Yep. Yep.
and really a very large survey of it, so that the knowledge that accumulated up to now on the field of bioelectromagnetics and the stimulation was then squeezed,
Yeah, fair.
so that yeah, the best of it, and so the frequencies as well as the intensities were then chosen according to this, to
Okay.
this comprehensive study. Now, if you go to higher intensities, like let's say 300 Tesla, no Tesla, millitesla,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
not 300
Yeah.
Tesla, it's mortal, but let's say 300 millitesla. There was times some 30 to 40 years ago when I put my head into such coil, that it was of this extent,
Yeah.
into such coil, and really at the moment, I felt really very badly. It was really aggressive, something unbearable almost.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what does it mean if you use high intensity, and I would say that 300 millitesla is not yet an intensity that would provoke the firing of neurons,
Right.
but still it is something that forces these already established waves in the head,
Mm-hmm.
and so it may be painful. You feel very oddly, and I would not advise this.
Yeah.
So if I come back, so 2.5 millitesla is, I would say, a very safe
Ah,
intensity. but at the same time, it is effective. Actually, we found research where even something like nanotesla were used. This is really a very, very small intensity, even in relation to our geomagnetic static field. You know, our geomagnetic field is around, let's say, 47 microtesla. This is in the range of tens of microtesla. So nanotesla is
Yeah.
still 1,000 times lower than
Yeah.
this, you know. And so it seems that these magnetic fields can enhance if they are repetitive, you know, they can work in a resonance manner, and they can put certain processes in our head or in our organism in resonance, you know, with them, and they can then very slowly and gently induce certain vibrations in our bodies. And this is important. So it's not so much, let's say, this how they are high in intensity, but if they are repetitive.
Yeah.
This seems to be important.
And I'd also just maybe kind of like a side tangent, but I'd be curious to ask you if things like the technology that we use would have a similar kind of effect on our brains, or if that's something that you've thought about or maybe scares you, that using certain things with Wi-Fi around us or just the phones in our pocket, if that kind of affects our brains on some level.
Well, yes, it would affect. Microwaves if are effective even in the sense of well, increasing our temperature. You know, the temperature level is increased by, let's say, zero point 0.1 or 2 degrees centigrade or Fahrenheit. So it is a very small thing, but it may be important. But more important is that they can be aggressive. They are non-repetitive, but it seems that they can be by just by this non-repetitiveness, they may be in resonance with different processes and interchanging with them, you know, interfering with them and mixing them, you know, so that maybe they can provoke certain confusions. And it seems that they may enhance certain processes or that result in accumulation of energy. And there are certain researches that show that we may have a bigger chance of getting some tumors if we use, you know, this very often than if you don't use this um, applications close to our head, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, I'd also just be curious to, so for a lot of the people who might watch your videos, they might not understand what brain waves really are on a fundamental level or why they exist. If you're just explaining in simple terms what brain waves are and what they do inside of our brains, like why they exist, how would you explain that to someone?
Well, the brain waves are actually oscillating electrical voltages in the brain. They are measured just a few millions of a volt when you are measuring this in, you know, on the skin. So in the brain they are stronger, but still very, very low level. You wouldn't feel it on your finger, for instance. They represent an element of coherency among neuron spikes throughout the whole brain. And as I say, this coherency means that, like with laser, you know, that the crests and troughs are on the same spot at the same time. They may originate from very deep brain structures, and even today, because they were found, I think, in 1924, but even today, so almost 100 years hence, it is not yet fully known what they are doing and why they are here. But we know that there are, let's say, five different levels of these waves that correspond to five different mental, psychological, physiological states. And they are from the lowest to the highest frequency level. They are divided into delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. So they are called, you know. And if we look at delta, this is between 0.5 to 4 hertz. They let's say, follow our sleep. I mean, when we sleep, we have the maximum of these delta waves. You know, these are very slow waves of, let's say, 1 or 2 hertz, up to 4 hertz, as I told. When we are deeply relaxed and inward focused, so also, let's say, in deep meditation, for instance, we have the most, our intensity of our brain waves is mostly expressed in theta waves. When I express myself like this means that we do not have exclusively at certain time only delta or theta or alpha and so on waves. We have all of them, but the important thing is which are the most prominent. So we are now speaking about this prominence, you know.
Yeah.
So to come back, if we have these theta waves, this between 4 and 8 hertz, we are then deeply relaxed and inward focused. If the most prominent waves are alpha, this means between 8 and 12 hertz, we are relaxed and in passive attention only if we have closed eyelids. Then with beta waves, they are between 12 and 35 hertz. We have perhaps something like anxiety, or we are active, or external attention, but we also can be relaxed but attentive, you know. With gamma, these are, let's say, above 30 or 35 hertz, up to, I don't know, 80 or so. We are mostly very concentrated, so highly, highly attentive. Now, if I may continue, via influencing these distinct brainwaves, this means that we are making something like a resonance, so we induce some brainwaves through external stimulation, like with Neorhythm, with magnetic fields of frequency, let's say theta. So if we are exposed to, let's say, 4 hertz of magnetic stimulation, then we induce theta state, and we can then, our meditation state or relaxation state are then enhanced, you know, because through the process called entrainment, these theta waves are enhanced because of exposure to this external stimulation, even if this stimulation is of a low intensity.
And
okay.
And if someone were to say want to influence their focus and attention, I noticed that you have a specific protocol, and I noticed that a lot of the protocols will have, say, like a primary and secondary frequency. What is the purpose of that?
Yes. Well, at the beginning, we want to use many frequencies, but then we saw that this perhaps could be too complicated for the beginning, and we decided for only 2 frequencies. one that should be the leading frequency according to the literature. This is a very comprehensive survey of bioelectromagnetic literature. And another frequency that would be, let's say, around 10 times of lesser intensity. This frequency should be a harmonic of this leading frequency, so in certain harmonic and relation to it, so that it works in a supportive manner. By this, we can address, let's say, more of these physiological processes that are in the brain. So our influence is more extensive than only by one frequency.
Okay.
And it is a supportive relation. So this is the reason why we decided for two frequencies. In the future, for instance, we may decide it even for more frequencies, but let's go step by step.
It's fair.
So yeah, and if I come back, yeah, we use it in one of these programs, even one frequency that belongs to this gamma range. It's for the enhancement of vitality. It is around 40 hertz, for instance. Yeah.
And in the research that you guys have done so far, what is the biggest takeaway for something like this? Like if you use a gamma frequency, does it directly create a gamma brainwave in the brain, or does it just kind of boost up lower frequencies? Like what is your perspective on the research you've done so far?
Well, we see that the brain can actually use such stimulation that is supportive to the intended purpose, yeah, intended from the Neorhythm standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay. But actually, it has its own freedom, as I told you. It is not force, it is non-invasive. So we did in our past two researches, fully scientific researches that were also published in scientific literature. With relaxation program as it is used in this contemporary device, and the attention program. So for relaxation, for the enhancement of intention. And what we get from these researches is that actually we did the research, our focus was in knowing the influence of the stimulation via scanning of physiological parameters of volunteers. Every group had 25 volunteers, and we measured many of their physiological parameters via especially electrodes while they were exposed to this stimulation. And what we learned was that these physiological parameters with relaxation program really demonstrated that the physiological balance was inclined towards the so-called parasympathetic stimulation. This means towards relaxation of the organism. Yeah. However, it is interesting that with this same program of relaxation, brain waves showed higher alertness, which was quite a surprise for us. And we learned through this that sleepiness was not enhanced, which means that such program is good for daily relaxation, or even for drivers, for instance, who want to be relaxed, but at the same time they must be attentive, not to fall to sleep, while in attention, in testing the attention program, we found significant lowering of error making in a special test performed during the whole stimulation. So through the whole stimulation during this research, these volunteers were exposed to this magnetic field stimulation, but at the same time, they had to perform certain game, that demanded full focus. And we found so that the error making was lowered in a statistically significant manner. But also we found that these volunteers expressed higher relaxation and more energy. And physiology, interesting, showed that beta waves were on the top. So we expected before this research that the beta waves, will be enhanced with the use of the program against the control. But, we learned that through the performing this test, these volunteers were so attentive that even with the control, because the control group also had to do this test, they were so in such tension, under such tension that the beta waves were on the top and much higher than with the relaxation program. The same beta waves were on a much lower level. So we saw this, if we compare the beta wave level between the relaxation program and the attentive program, we saw this difference. But we still learned that they were more relaxed. This is interesting, with attention. And we interpret this that they actually used less energy when they were under this stimulation, and because of that, they could be more relaxed against this control group which was not under this stimulation. I must say that this was a placebo-controlled research, so that double blind, so that even the assistant of the research did not know when these volunteers were exposed to the magnetic field. This is it. Yeah. So now we are doing the research, new research. This is an actual research now through questionnaire, through which we actually are asking people that already use the device, Neorhythm device, about the use and effectiveness of all programs. And then we concentrate on three of them. So the two already research programs, that this means that we are doing something like a follow-up research of our previous, mostly physiological scientific researches. And we are also performing through this questionnaire a preliminary research for the future comprehensive research that will concern the influencing sleep. And this research is intended to be the most comprehensive research in the field of bioelectromagnetics in these domains of stimulating sleep in the world up to now. Because one wouldn't believe, but we found only one really, let's say, fully scientific research done in the field of magnetic stimulation of sleep, and it was published in 2001 or so. So really we are waiting. The world is waiting for such a research, and we intend to do it, I think, toward the end of this year.
That's very exciting. How many people are going to be involved with that research?
I think that around 160 to 200.
That's very exciting.
This will be a comprehensive research. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd also be curious what you think is kind of like the long-term possibility of this kind of technology, whether it's directly with the Neorhythm or with the next version of it in say like 5 to 10 years from now. Like, what do you think is really the vision for this kind of product?
The vision is okay. I think that this technology is really very promising. As I told you before, not only through this basic level of magnetic stimulation, this is also very important, but also through some further knowledge of stimulating via very, very complex fields. We are doing something on this that can convey also some complex information to the organisms through which we can actually speak to organisms' biochemistry and even genetics. This would be the achievable goal for this bioelectromagnetics research and development. But of course, this research should then have some funds, you know. I mean, it should be funded. There are many investments into biochemistry, into molecular genetics, for instance. And because of that, there are many findings. So if we want to have the similar findings in the field of bioelectromagnetics and in the field of this much more non-invasive technology that is really harmless, you know, we also must have more funding, more investment into this basic and applicative research.
Makes a lot of sense.
But it is promising. It is promising.
Yeah. And for people who might not understand the technology super well and might be like overly excited about it, what would you say are like the limitations of something like the Neorhythm? Like if someone had someone wants to become a genius overnight and they think that this could do it for them, like how would you explain to them what the limitations might be?
Well, there are limitations. As I told you, the organism is not enforced by this stimulation. So we can help the organism. Actually, what the Neorhythm does is, in a way, to speak to the organism, you know, to enhance something in a soft manner. And of course, it cannot stretch the organism beyond certain limits. And I think this is safe. So, and of course, we cannot make a genius through this, but we can help a man, a human, to attain better concentration or better sleep and so on. But again, what is important is what are the reasons, you know. If, for instance, somebody is really very excited because of certain tragedy in the family or so, we cannot make miracles through the use of Neorhythm that it would he or she would be relaxed and so on. Maybe a little more relaxed, maybe a little more, yes. But it will help in, let's say, normal situation, and even in the manner the person will allow this language, you know, of the Neorhythm to go into, you know, our not only psyche but also into our physiology, to enter us, you know. So let's say we should be open to this, and then it can work. But what we learned through these two researches is that the effect of Neorhythm is objective, you know. We see that sometimes, because we actually did three, you know, we had three groups, you know. One group was the control group, the other group was stimulated that did not know that it was stimulated, and the third group was stimulated and these volunteers knew they were stimulated. So the placebo also worked there, and we were sometimes surprised that this placebo worked in the negative manner. So it seemed that these persons expected perhaps too much and they were disappointed. And even this stimulation did not work uh, so efficiently in certain cases than in cases the people did not know they were stimulated, you know.
Right.
So if they were just only open to it. So
Right.
I think that if you are open, you may believe that it works on our physiology. It enhances our brainwaves without enforcing, without being invasive. And this is it. It will help us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, just by helping, it has its own limitations. And I think it is good to have them, you know. So one cannot commit suicide by using Neorhythm. But by using pills, this is another story. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. I guess another just kind of side question was I was curious why the sleep protocol was on the back of the head and why you could how you could explain that to people.
Because this centers for our sleep are in, let's say, medulla oblongata, and the closest point is thus here, just here, you know. So where the neck and our head, you know, stick together. So just because of that, because this is the nearest point, let's say, to our sleeping centers in our brain stem, you know. But we stimulate also via other centers. So it is like this, you know.
Right,
This is one, yeah.
right.
And we stimulate also these so-called temporal regions.
I guess something that I also find interesting, I've done quite a bit of just curious research and looking around onto the effects of brain synchronization and how that I guess like functional synchronization with like functional networks in the brain. Do you think something like this, because it stimulates multiple areas of the brain, can help with functional synchronization in someone who might have trouble with that? For example, like someone who has like a reading disorder because there's a lack of synchronization. Do you think of technology like this, perhaps like another future iteration of it, could help with something like
Yes,
that?
yes, it can help with synchronization, of course, because the pulses are at the same time. We actually help not only to enhance a certain this region of brain waves, you know, frequency region of the brain waves, but also we help in this synchronization through this because all these pulses are synchronized from the both sides, you know,
Yeah.
and from this point, if it is about sleep,
Hmm.
because other, you know, these positions can be different.
Yeah.
But it is not important which is the position. This stimulation is synchronized, and it will work it will help synchronizing our brain waves throughout the school or brain. You know.
That makes sense. I think that wraps up a lot of the basic questions, but I'm also just kind of curious to ask what you're most curious about these days. What kind of piques your interest, or what you're trying to figure out these days?
These days,
Yeah.
well, we are, as I told you, we are making this research in using Neorhythm, and I think this is a research that just started, so we are very interested in the outcome of it, and we hope that we will be able to publish this as a follow-up of the research that has already been done, and we are also very curious about the use of this Neorhythm device for sleeping because we prepared although the main part of this future research that will be quite comprehensive, as I told you. And but this questionnaire, this actual, research will help us to finalize it. So we are just doing research and are looking forward
Yeah,
to just to learn. Yeah.
fair enough. And if there was to be a Neorhythm 2, like a next device, say in 5 years from now, what kind of improvements would you hope to see with that device?
Well, this would be first to use the science, so scientific knowledge. It is used now, okay, but I think that in years to come it will accumulate more of this knowledge. So this steadily growing knowledge, this is one thing. The other thing is that we could use more complex fields and, of course, based on research. What does it mean? This means the the complex fields that would even more address our biochemical and even more sophisticated physiological processes going on in our organism. And this is, I think, the one of or another of these possibilities. And there is perhaps a third one that would involve a possible use of feedback system, so that we can then use or actually decide about the use of certain programs in relation or depending on our actual physiological state.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that, for instance, if it is about our sleeping, when we are in a deep sleep, let's say and the delta waves are our most prominent waves, we would do this enhancement. And then when we see that organism would try to be in this quick, mode when we are dreaming, for instance,
Yeah.
then we can, just perhaps just stop with this delta waves, because organisms would like this so-called REM phase, otherwise,
Yep.
REM phase,
Yep.
of sleeping. So more quick, these brain waves. So we can enhance these waves then at this time,
Yep.
or just be quiet with magnetic stimulation. It would depend, but we would be sensitive. So it would need a feedback, to our organism. So this is one possibility of the enhancing and developing
Yeah.
such devices, Neorhythm.
And is there any trouble with using EEG to measure brainwaves at the same time that you're using the magnetic stimulation? Does that interrupt or cause noise for the EEG?
Yes, it can be. I mean, if not with the research, we found certain points and we, of course, experimented with this so that our research was not interfered with the simultaneous
Yep.
this performing the program of stimulation,
Mm-hmm.
magnetic stimulation. So this was okay. But there is a problem with sleeping. For instance, if certain person will just sleep and have these electrodes in the brain, this can interrupt or interfere with the sleeping of ordinary sleeping. So yes, we shall think about perhaps certain other applications. I know that there are certain applications that can register such fields even if without electrodes. So this is a ongoing development, and must go according to the technology that is steadily developing.
Yeah.
And by this, I think in some future, not so far from now, we can use this feedback system without attaching electrode to the school, because this would be very, I think, clumsy,
Yeah.
if not even
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. I think I'm also
Yeah.
very excited to hear how the sleep research goes. I think I've seen some research on pink noise where they use during a certain stage of sleep. They stimulate the sleep spindles. They try to peak the sleep spindles to be stronger, which actually affects
Mhm.
memory. So there's some research showing that just through auditory entrainment, they could help older
Yes.
individuals improve their
Yes,
memory
I heard.
functional.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I also heard about that. But I
yeah,
think that we may work this also by magnetic
yeah.
stimulation. But it needs also some basic research. It doesn't go just by
Of
chance, you
course.
know, you cannot find it. Okay.
Of course, of course. And I'd also be curious, just on that note, if you think something like this, maybe in the long term, could be more impactful than something like auditory brain entrainment.
Mm, well, it demands research. It
Okay,
is difficult to just to answer such question. It wouldn't be fair, you know.
that's fair.
I think it could be, but let's see, because you know it could be done with RTMS or with Blesser. We must find the magnitude of this field and, of course, frequencies
Yeah.
also. No?
Is that magnitude something that you are still experimenting with for the Neorhythm device?
Yes, yes. With this sleep program, we also will see what are the optimal magnitudes, I mean intensities
Yep.
of stimulation. But as I told you before, this research that I mentioned that was published in 2001, performed by researcher Dr. Pelka, um, the intensities varied, you know, for I think 1000 magnitude of 1000, you know, so that he just advised to put these devices under the pillow or uh, one something like a meter or so, you know, far away.
Yeah.
So if you if you calculate, I calculated this field, you know, and
Yeah.
found that it may be 1000, you know, times difference
I see.
between the intensity of these two positions.
Yeah.
But yet he found statistically significant results. So that this intensity is important, but maybe not so as we think. But of course, we must respect certain upper limit when this intensity, high intensity, can become invasive or annoying. You know.
Yeah. That makes sense. Awesome. I think that definitely wraps up all the questions I had. Is there any other closing remarks or things that you'd want people to know about this technology or this device before we close off the call?
So I would only say that they may just try and use Neorhythm, and I think that we will prepare even more of such programs and perhaps devices in the future. And this is a good direction. And also one thing, if it doesn't work just on the first trial, you know, let let them be patient and continue. Sometimes the organism needs some time to adapt to this stimulation, and then it can work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hopping on the call with me. You shared a lot of wisdom and knowledge, and I'm happy to kind of cut this interview into pieces that people will be able to watch over and over again, hopefully, and learn a lot from. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you too for the invitation.
Yeah.
So, and perhaps we shall have some interview in the future too. Hmm?
Sounds good. That'd be awesome. I'll prepare a lot more questions next time then.
Okay, okay. So, goodbye
All right, take
and
care for now.
thank you.
So I hope you guys loved this conversation. I hope you learned something new. If not, feel free to go back throughout the video. I've tried to timestamp as much of it as I could so that you could kind of skip back to the interesting parts that piqued your interest. And if you want to support this channel as well as the eAthlete Labs channel, or just want to improve your gaming skills, I highly recommend checking out the eAthlete Labs website and checking out the courses in coaching on the site. I think that's become potentially our main focus this year. It's become so much of how we've been able to interact with people who are fans of the brand for so long and help them to get some pretty amazing results in terms of their esports career. So if that's something that piques your interest, then check it out. Otherwise, just thank you guys for watching. I appreciate everything down from the views, the likes, the comments. Every little bit of support really means so much, and I'm really excited to keep uploading more interviews like this and some bonus videos on this channel. So I hope you guys stick around. I hope you guys absolutely love it all.